Hey everybody, this is going to be a pretty short recording and not even really a tutorial, just letting you kind of see what this whole thing with the FS7 where we talk about log mode recording is and why we do that and what it allows us to do. In particular, this is of use to us in situations with a lot of dynamic range, meaning a big extreme difference between our brightest areas and our darkest areas. And I thought I would compare this to what you shot with in production 1 or that type of camera. So this is some stuff shot on the NX3 in standard Rec 709. And in this case, it's been exposed for the ground level so that things on the ground and under these shadows kind of come out looking okay, and we can make out that shadow detail. And what you can see here is the problem is all this bright part in the sky and some of these brighter parts on the street and on the cars just kind of go away. We're losing any information there. It's just not there. And I can try to do some color grading on this and, bring it down a little bit and try to separate that. You can see we're pulling a little bit of detail out of the street here and being able to see a little bit of that, but this is basically just lost information up here. And if I say, okay, well, what if I just expose for the sky, and I kind of do that, and you can see I'm now picking up a little bit of gradation, that there's some blue here and some clouds up here. I'm starting to lose all this shadow detail. So if you look at these areas of the trees, they almost look kind of black. And if I try to actually color this and bring some color in, I can do that. You can definitely see there is some texture in the sky here, but I haven't really been able to bring anything back out of these black areas in the shadow. And the issue is there's just too much distinction between the bright and dark areas, and the camera can't capture them both at once directly to standard Rec 709 form. So what log recording does is, as we've seen, it captures this sort of looking like a washed out image, but what it's doing is it's sort of smushing everything together. That's not the technical term. There's a mathematical calculation it's doing, but it's bringing these bright areas and these dark areas closer together so we can pick up the detail in both. So you can see all the way through here, even in these dark shadow areas, I got plenty of detail. I can make out the texture on this tree. Nothing in the street here is blowing out. I'm actually seeing some color difference between the texture of the pavement and the sky, which we weren't always seeing with the NX3 footage as much. And so it's bringing all this in. Now, the image as it is looks bad. It actually looked kind of better with the NX3 footage because we had some contrast and saturation and stuff. This is not designed to be screened as is. This is just what's getting recorded on the camera. But then if we color this, we can bring out that saturation and color and still maintain some of this detail. So I got plenty of detail here. You can see we're not blowing out those highlights on the car so much. We still got plenty of richness in these shadow areas. Again, if I pop back and compare this to what we were getting with the NX3, you can see how much more detail there is kind of across the board. Here was the exposed for the ground, and you can see that the sky and these highlights were just kind of losing a lot of information. Or we expose it for the sky and we're losing all this stuff in the shadows on the ground. Now with the FS7, we can keep sort of all of that data there. And I love we can see all this texture in the tree and such. You can make out all of this. And that gives us, because we have all that data, a lot more freedom in terms of how we color it. So this is sort of bringing it back to normal. I could go for something like this if I want a little more contrasty, more saturated look. And you can see even where this is dark, I still got some texture in there. I could say then, okay, I want to actually pull something out of the sky and bring out the blue in the sky there. And you can see there's detail there. I can see where there's kind of this white back here where there's a patch of clouds and this, and it's not affecting all the highlights everywhere else. So I just have more control over it. Let's take a look at another example that's even, I think, a little easier to see. So this is not a bad looking shot. This is actually pretty good for what we could do with an NX3. We're still getting some detail. We're losing a lot in the darkest area of the shadows down here, but I'm kind of seeing everything, and I'm definitely getting this nice sky with some dark blue, some bright blue, and picking up even the shapes of the clouds there. So this looks pretty good for that, and I could even color it a little bit and try to go for a look or something if I wanted, but I think the raw original image here looks okay. That was exposed for the sky. If I try to expose for the ground instead, so if I say, man, I'm just losing so much detail down in these shadow areas under these trees, I want to pick up some of that. Well, I could expose to try to pick up some of that and get that detail, but the problem now is my sky is just blowing out, and you can see I've lost all the texture of the clouds here, and even this area where it's still picking up, there's a color gradation. I've lost this sort of, beautiful blue that I had here. I've gone to something that looks sort of greenish and washed out because I'm basically pushing the sensor farther than it's designed to go. So I can color that and, bring it back a little bit to normal, where now I have some shadow detail, but also some color down here, but you can still see I've lost all this texture here. Now let's compare that to log mode. And again, the raw log footage looks pretty washed out and not great, but you can tell, I got that texture back in the clouds, but nothing here is blowing out to white. I'm not losing any detail up here, and I'm not losing any detail down here in the shadows. I'm picking up all the information across the whole spectrum, which means when I get into color grading, I have a lot more freedom in what I can do with it. And I can push things darker, brighter, more saturated, less saturated, and have a lot more options. So if I just sort of grade this back to normal, maybe a little oversaturated normal, this is a more contrasty sort of look. And this look actually looks pretty similar to my raw footage where I exposed for the sky. So with the NX3, where I said I want to pick up all this sky detail and I'm willing to lose a little shadow down here, this doesn't look that different. You can tell I've got a little more detail in the shadows, but the difference is now it's a creative choice. It's not something I'm forced into, because I can still bring back all those shadows if I want. But because I have so much data, I have a whole bunch of different ways I could color this now and play with it. So just having a little fun with it. Here's something where we want more of a washed out sky instead of this sort of bright blue. So we go a little more washed out, but still keeping the sort of bright blue here, still keeping the shadow areas pretty dark. Here's just a darker look overall. Here's if we really want to wash out that sky. So now it's not a blue sky day, it's kind of like an overcast. Again, we could even darken that up, lose some saturation. This is a very different mood and feel than what we had before. And now we are starting to lose a lot of detail here. This is maybe pushing it a little further than you'd probably want to, unless you really want that dark look. And again, we have the freedom to kind of choose that in post-production now. Now, if I want to bring some of that back, we could bring it back but say, I didn't really like that green. Let's make this more of a sort of fall overcast look. So we have all this detail here, and that gives us a lot to play with in the color grade. So now we can do something that looks like these leaves are maybe starting to change. And then we could make them even look maybe a little like deader, really remove some of the green. And now again, this is a different feel to the movie and what we're trying to get. Obviously, we'd have some sort of creative purpose and vision for what am I trying to do with this movie. So I don't know which of these looks would be right. It may be any of them. It may be none of them. It depends on what the movie is. But my point is we have all this freedom to sort of take this same footage and play with all these different looks, because we started with so much information and having all this here in the first place. And that's the key to the log footage. Kind of back to where I was. We had done fall. Now we did sort of dead. Then we can sort of go back to, here's a really like bright sunny day, green saturated colors. I can still make out the detail of all the branches down here. This is a really sort of colorful, upbeat, vivid look. And then I could say, yeah, let's kind of go back to somewhere in between where maybe we keep that blue sky, but we liked a little more of these sort of dead-ish or not as bright saturated leaves, and we can, switch between those two. Or we can go full on fall again and really like make these, okay, the leaves are all turning red, and we still got this blue sky here. So you have all those options. So the point of this is just understanding a little bit why we're going through this rigmarole of shooting something that looks like this instead of, shooting something that looks pretty decent right out of the gate and is exposed correctly and looks okay. We're shooting something that looks pretty blah to give us the freedom to do so many more things with the color in post-production when we get into our color grade. And so that's the idea of this. Hopefully makes sense to you why we're shooting in this mode now, and you get a sense of some of the possibilities and how much fun you can kind of have playing with the look and in really trying to achieve the very specific look and feel and tone that you're going for. So hope that was useful.